Well, good morning and welcome to Women in Leadership 2021. My name is Paul Reed and I'm publisher of the Journal of Business. And the fact that about 500 of you have chosen to spend this hour with us tells me how important this topic remains in our community. And that makes me smile. And while I'm disappointed that we don't get to do this in person, I'm confident that we will next spring. In fact, the Journal is hoping to have most of its events in person by fall. Zoom has helped to bring us together during this pandemic, but if you're like me, you'd prefer to be standing face to face, shake a few hands, and maybe even offer a hug or two. Soon, my friends. We launched this program 4 years ago with a single purpose: to create a dialogue in our business community about the need, challenge, and even successes of getting more women into leadership in our community. There can be no debate anymore that organizations that include women in senior management are more balanced, understand their workforces better, and in fact have better results. The challenge is that it's hard to change culture. It's hard to recast policies and practices and job descriptions and mentorships and employee advancement procedures to meet all those challenges. And it's hard for men to recognize what they aren't accustomed to seeing. And it's hard, yes, even for women who have worked so hard to make it to the top, to reach back down and lend a hand to the next woman. And that's why we're here. And it's why it's important that men are in the audience today and that men are at the virtual podium today. Because if the uncomfortable truth is that the majority of organizations are led by men, the only way we can change that landscape is to have male allies in that quest. The quote you see on the screen right now is evidence of that need. It came from a survey we did last month with all the past attendees of this event. It's your voice. More on that later. In the meantime, thank you, Wade, and all the men who are listening in today. We must do our part. With that said, we have a great program ahead, and because we recognize this thing called Zoom fatigue, we're going to try to get it done in about an hour or so. Just a word about today's program. Although our focus for these events fundamentally is to find ways to get more women into leadership positions, we know that the pandemic has not only been detrimental to that quest, but also has adversely impacted women in the workplace in general, far more than men. And so today, we're going to talk about that problem and provide you with four of what I call tales from the front. 3 women in different industries will help paint a picture of how the pandemic impacted their work lives and how their organizations responded. And as promised, we also have 1 man, a noted HR expert, who will talk about what he witnessed and this past year and how his organization tried to navigate that path for women and families. Of course, we'll also have Marty Dickinson back to walk us through some fantastic feedback we received from you about this past year and what we should have on our minds as we emerge from the pandemic and refocus on moving women up the organizational ladder. Because time is so short, we won't have a formal Q&A process, but the chat is active. And if you have a question for one of our panelists and you want to put that into the chat box, when they're not presenting, they might be able to answer your question or comment for you. So you have that option, but time is short, so we're going to get to it. But before we start, I want to thank our sponsors, without whom we don't get to create an environment for these kinds of discussions. Our major sponsor today is Stcu, and we are so thankful for the continued support it's provided, not just to the Journal of Business, but really to our community as a whole. And now it is my pleasure to welcome, through the magic of Zoom, Lindsay Myrie, Executive Vice President and CFO at Stcu, for a brief message. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Paul. It's really great to be back. Stcu is very excited to sponsor this year's Women in Leadership event. As the Executive Vice President and CFO for a financial institution, a position still dominated by men, I feel confident in saying that your return will be tremendous for this free event this year. Thank you to the Journal of Business for hosting and bringing us together for this important conversation. I do love numbers, so I thought I'd share a few numbers with you today. Stcu was founded by Spokane educators in 1934, a time when that was one of the few professions available to women. 9 of the 10 teachers were women who signed our Articles of Incorporation and founded us. Today, 72% of our workforce and 69% of our leaders are women. Of 5 C-suite positions, 3 of those are held by women. At any given time, about 10% of our staff are advancing their education through our tuition reimbursement effort, something I took advantage of to get my MBA. You may have seen in the news, but later this year, we are thrilled to welcome Cooley Dam Federal Credit Union to the STCU family in a merger that will help us both better serve our communities and our members. CDFCU is led by CEO Colleen Manley, along with an entire female executive team. I think it might be amiss if I didn't mention a few of our experiences from this past year. It's no secret that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted women, many of whom have tried to balance childcare challenges, virtual education, and a professional career for over the past 14 months. Who knew that I would moonlight as a 4th grade math teacher in the evenings this past year? At STCU, we've shown extreme flexibility to assist all employees, women and men, to help them meet the challenges caused by the pandemic. In the last year, employees have received up to 80 hours of COVID leave, 3 new wellness days to be used for any purpose, confidential counseling, and financial assistance. As we move out of the pandemic, we are evaluating ways to implement long-term flexibility to support employees with work-life balance. Our support extends beyond our own employees as well. In the year since the pandemic started, STCU has provided substantial support to businesses, schools, families, and community groups. This March, STCU celebrated Women's History Month by purchasing $30,000 in gift cards from locally owned restaurants, donating them primarily to organizations serving women in Eastern Washington, the Tri-Cities, and Northern Idaho. STCU is proud to serve our communities and our 227,000 members. We're here to assist you as well. We are so grateful for the opportunity to come together virtually this year, but I really can say I can't wait to see you all in person soon.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thanks again, STCU, for your tremendous support. We also are thrilled to have other two great organizations as sponsors in today's event. Both are influential in our community, and both have shown a great interest in the goal of this event. Please join me in virtually thanking Avista Corp and Innovia Foundation. They have been fantastic sponsors of this event. And now let's get to the program. Our first presenter's task is to present the problem to us through the lens of an accomplished economist. When we say that women have been disproportionately harmed by the pandemic, what do we mean? We hope to have Vange Ocasio-Hockheimer help us answer that question. Vange is an associate professor of economics at Whitworth University and is a frequent speaker in our region. She joined Whitworth about 10 years ago after serving on the faculty of the University of Denver. She earned her undergraduate degree at Binghamton University in New York and her master's and doctorate from Colorado State University. In addition to her university work, Vange recently launched her own research firm, Grand Fur Analytics, researching subjects ranging from economic development to housing, environment, and socioeconomic outcomes. She serves on a host of community and regional boards and has received numerous awards for her philanthropic efforts and achievements. Please welcome my friend Vange Ocasio-Hockheimer.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that kind introduction. It is a pleasure to be here today. And during a pandemic and consequently an economic recession, we like to say that we're all in this together. But I like to say, and maybe some of you like to say, that we are all in this together. We have been in this together. However, we haven't been in the same boat. A pandemic coupled with a recession will impact low-skilled workers differently than high-skilled workers. And for sure, it will impact women differently than men. I'll give you a little bit of a landscape in terms of the data for the labor force participation rate for women. So before the pandemic, pre-COVID, women have historically had a lower labor force participation than men. This means that women participate in the labor force at a lower rate than men do. So pre-pandemic, women, the labor force participation rate was 57.8% compared to 69.3% for men. And this is data from the Labor Bureau statistics. During COVID and after COVID, and mind you, this is data from 2020, the expectation is that when the 2021 data comes out, the numbers are going to be lower. So during the pandemic, and this is data as of May 2020, that's the latest data available, The women's labor force participation rate dropped to 55.2%. That's almost a 3% drop in less than a year. And to put this into perspective, in 1986, the labor force participation rate for women was 55.2%. I'm sorry, it was 55.2%. So this is, we have digressed. The participation rate in the labor force for women has digressed to 1986 levels. So that is alarming. And so that is something that we are now beginning to see a lot of work done in the literature in terms of what are the implications of this drop and how do we bring that participation rate back up. The United Nations recently identified a few important reasons as to why women have dropped out of the labor force, and these reasons are not unheard of. So one of them is that women and girls generally earn less, they tend to save less, and they hold less secure jobs. And so when a pandemic or a crisis hits, women are going to be mostly impacted by virtue of holding less secure jobs. And a major reason is also that they do most of the unpaid care work at home. So a lot of women, as you know, myself included, had to scale back the hours at work, had to work remotely from home to care for children, to be, as Lindsay mentioned, to be tutors and teachers for our own children. And so this can potentially create some setbacks as a result of the reduction in hours and as a result of all the distractions that the pandemic brought to women. And so this, in terms of looking at the implications of this, we can see, for the obvious reason, a lower participation rate for women, but because women were working less hours and distracted at home, this can cause setbacks in pay raises, promotion, and the opportunity to continue to advance in the corporate ladder. So that's definitely an issue that we should be aware of and try to tackle it in terms of policy. Another reason why we see that women dropped from the labor force is that they tend to be overrepresented in, as I said before, the less secure jobs, but also the industries that were hit the hardest during the pandemic. So that's retail, tourism, and hospitality industries. Those jobs are mainly held by women. In terms of looking forward post-COVID, I think the economic recovery measures should include the following, and I will conclude with these suggestions. The recovery, economic and social policies should be gender responsive, and it should include the removal of barriers that prevent the full involvement of women in economic activities. And these barriers, or the removal of these barriers, include access to quality childcare, policies that narrow or eliminate the education gap and the pay gap for women, and also create corporate and social policies that allow women to reach their full potential. So post-COVID gives corporations and policymakers an opportunity to mitigate the disadvantages that women are facing. And with this, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanj. That was a perfect way to set us up for our tales from the front, and we'll get to those right now. Our first is from Brooke Baker Spink, Chief Development Officer at Baker Construction and Development. Brooke joined Baker Construction, her family's business, in 2013 after working for 5 years at State Farm Insurance, the last 3 of which she was overseeing 30 agency offices as a field consultant. A Spokane native and graduate of Washington State University with a degree in business administration in marketing and international business, now is helping her family business grow in the hospitality and multifamily sectors, and has secured more than $100 million in new business for the company. Brooke serves on a number of boards, including both the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce and Greater Spokane Incorporated, as well as the Spokane Sports Commission, and served on several important committees in our region, and has received a number of awards for her role as an emerging leader. Brooke is married to Steve Spink, and in context for this year, welcomed their daughter London just as the pandemic began on St. Patrick's Day 2020. Please join me virtually in welcoming the ever effervescent Brooke Baker.
Thanks, Paul. Ever effervescence, I like that. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Brooke Baker Spink, and I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Baker Construction and Development. It's a huge honor to be speaking to you all today, and I still very much feel like a fish out of water with this powerhouse of a group. Plain and simple, I'm a new mom in an executive role working full-time in a predominantly male-dominated industry. I think I'm going to put that on my business cards. I gave birth to my daughter while the world was quite literally on fire. I had 3 months for maternity leave, and I'm grateful to say that I work for a company that made that time with my daughter as special as it should be. Although I play a critical role with our company, and it's my job to help bring in $85 million worth of work annually, my employer supported me as a woman throughout the pandemic. Today, I want to share with you my experience of what it was like having a COVID baby, what it was like coming back to work, and how my company supported me the entire way. I also want to chat a little bit more about what we can do together to get more women into leadership roles and move the needle with gender diversification. I'm going to call this portion of my speech Chapter 1, the scariest, most exciting day ever. It's March of 2020, and we're just learning about COVID. It's the weekend before I'm about to give birth, and I was terrified. As if I wasn't freaked out enough about having a baby, now I'm about to basically give birth in the dumpster fire that 2020 truly was. That weekend, I decided to tune the news out and stay away from Facebook. I focused only on healthy things like reality television and Taco Bell. And by the end of the weekend, my husband was driving me to Sacred Heart Hospital for my daughter's big arrival. So we're going about 114 on the freeway and on the phone with the nurse as she's telling us to hurry up and get there, because at that point, they were still allowing one visitor to be in the delivery room. We made it in time so Steve could be with me, and at 8:54 p.m. on St. Patrick's Day, London made her debut. She was surprisingly adorable considering the copious amounts of Doritos and Hello Sugar donuts I consumed while carrying her. I fell asleep that night thinking it was the most emotional, scary, amazing, rewarding day of my life. Chapter 2, they let me bring her home. Being home with my daughter for those 3 months was amazing and bizarre all in one. My dad and my stepmom were the only people we allowed in the house for 6 weeks, and they took amazing care of us. We scrubbed everything that came in and out of the house ferociously, and I continued to avoid the news. Maternity leave for me was an interesting adjustment. I would best describe myself at work like a drunk ping pong ball bouncing in every direction and just going. I'm used to fielding about 100 emails, texts, and calls daily, and I work hard to be responsive for my clients and our team. I was so used to that insane cadence of activity. Then being home with a newborn and not able to leave the house forced me to slow down and be more intentional and appreciative of that special time with her. Having a baby in the pandemic was such a bright light of hope for our family. The executive team and all of my coworkers at Baker completely blocked and tackled for me and protected that special time that I had with London. Our executive team is comprised of 7 people, myself and 6 men. From the onset of COVID, the executive team was guns blazing to protect our company and employees. They pulled long hours to ensure our employees and subcontractors were safe, protected our 29 current construction projects and the millions of dollars our clients had invested. They retained and paid every single employee prior to any PPP funding, and the list goes on. Not one time was I made to feel guilty about not helping toe that line. They kept me in the loop with major initiatives and anything major relating to my clients, but I was insulated from the craziness and left to be a new mom in the middle of the pandemic. Our team knew that if they wanted me to be back in fighting shape and ready to rock it in June, I needed to have this experience with London. Chapter 3, drunk ping pong ball goes back to work. I've now been back to work full-time for almost a year. It's a completely different experience working full-time with a little one. The company allows me flexibility and freedom, and this is essentially critical for our household because my husband also works full-time. London's in school full-time, and now that she's 14 months old, I completely understand the parental saying that the days are long, but the years are short. And I call it school because it makes me feel less guilty about sending her there every day, by the way. The big takeaway here is the word flexibility. The company knows that in order for me to be on my A game for both my family and the company, I need the ability to be nimble with my time. As long as I'm performing and doing what the company needs me to do, they allow me flexibility, and that flexibility grants me a great deal of stability and workplace happiness. The company breathes flexibility as part of our corporate culture, and it's a big selling point in our recruiting efforts. Linda Elkin once said this best to me over a cup of coffee. I'll never forget it. She said, mentorship inside your company is important, but the real way that you're going to grow inside the company is when you're shown advocacy. You need an advocate. You need someone rooting for you and helping you lay down the path to achieve those goals. Women especially need this advocacy and support from upper level management. Chapter 4, ideas on how to bridge the executive gender gap from a sleep-deprived mom of a 14-month-old beautiful terrorist. Buy-in. I hit on it earlier with my story about Linda, but in order for women to reach top management, men need to be supportive and engaged in their rise. This support from men needs to begin with them recognizing that these hurdles for women do exist. The Boston Consulting Group's reports that even though 75% of men believe that teams with women perform more successfully, only 19% would agree that it's actually harder for women to reach management. There must be a visible commitment from the CEO and the executive level to recognize gender bias and want to actually do something about it. Retention and advancement. That same report shares that nearly 2/3 of women view retention and advancement as their biggest hurdles in their jobs. Retention and advancement go hand in hand. If you don't have a way to identify and nurture talent in middle-level management, you won't be able to insulate and retain female employees, let alone grow them into the executive level. Inside and outside growth channels. There is a leaky pipeline from middle management to senior management, and we can patch those leaks through sponsorship and development. In order for me to perform at the highest level, I need mentorship, sponsorship, advocacy, and that goes inside and outside the company. I'm working with our executive team internally and also a professional business coach externally to help me improve my ability to influence, negotiate, create my personal brand, build strategic relationships, and continue to network effectively. Chapter 5, the end goodbye. Just kidding. Final chapter, chapter 5, a grateful woman. By focusing on flexibility, retention and advancement, sponsorship and advocacy, and truly recognizing the barriers that women face, Spokane will begin to see more women in leadership roles. As a woman in leadership, I'm encouraged about where our great city is heading because of courageous conversations like this one. I want to thank the very brave Paul Reed for letting me speak to you all today. It's been a fun and challenging craft to this speech, and I'm thinking it's only fitting that I end with the revolutionary and impactful Spice Girls adage of girl power. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Brooke. You did a great job, by the way.
Thanks.
So on to our second tale from the front, and that is from Katie Bruije, Chief Human Resources Officer at Washington Trust Bank. Katie is responsible for effective leadership and oversight of all HR functions and serves as a member of the bank's executive committee. She holds an MBA from Gonzaga University, where she also has taught as an adjunct and earned her bachelor's degree in business administration from Eastern Washington University, go Eags. Katie serves on a number of boards, including the Providence Healthcare Foundation Board, the Dean's Executive Council for Gonzaga School of Business, and the Downtown Spokane Partnership Board, as well as the Leadership Council for the American Heart Association. She lives in Spokane with her husband, Ed, and their 2 children. It is a huge honor to welcome Katie Bruije.
Well, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Brooke, that's going to be a hard story to top. I remember my first baby being that little. And a funny story, a little ad lib. Culturally, you want to work for a company that supports families, and I know your company does, and so does Washington Trust Bank. And I remember coming back to work after maternity leave, and I had I'd been back at work a couple of months, and I had a 5-month-old baby at home, and my boss, Jack Heath, the president, put us all off site for an executive retreat. And I had to pull him aside. We had outside speakers. We're locked in a room in the Davenport all day. And I pulled him aside and said, so I'm going to have to sneak out every couple hours? And he just kind of looked at me. I said, because I have a baby at home. Oh yeah, sure. Do whatever you need, Katie, do whatever you need. So it's kind of funny. I think as we go through this journey as working mothers, we all have these kind of funny stories over the years of things that probably don't cross other people's minds that are very top of mind for us, especially with newborn babies. So, you know, Vaughn said it very well, and certainly you all know, there's no doubt the pandemic caused a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people. I can't think of anything else that's happened in our lifetimes that has impacted us socially, emotionally, mentally, financially, and of course, physically. It's a global health pandemic. I heard awful stories from some of our employees at work last summer who weren't allowed to say goodbye to their dying parents because they weren't accepting visitors. There were lots of fears about what this pandemic would do to us on all levels. We kept at Washington Trust everyone gainfully employed and in a full pay status, but we had lots of individuals telling us how their spouses or partners were losing their jobs. Every single day we'd get more news about that. I don't need to remind any of you about what the past year has done to us as a society. We're trying to look past that and move forward and learn what we can from it and apply that. But there's no doubt in my mind that the pandemic impacted women more than any other group, and it impacted women of color especially. Statistically speaking, as Vaughn shared in her household, and it's true in mine as well, women tend to do more caretaking and household duties than men. The 50s are over, right? If the 50s were still here, we wouldn't be sitting here with you on this Zoom call. We'd be living up to the Good Housekeeping article and preparing a scotch and water for our husband at 5 o'clock and grooming our children and meeting them at the door and having the house maintained. That's not reality. It's 2020s. My husband and I share the cooking duties, which sometimes mean Uber Eats or eating out. The housekeeper helps keep the major dirt at bay. Kids are running around in sports, online school for a long time. But all of that being said, the majority of normal household duties and kid things fall to typically the women. We tend to be the CPAs, the mental health counselor for the kids or the husbands or the partners, fixing everything from physical ouches to the deep mentally anguished, dramatic conversations that come with preteens and teens. If you've ever watched a woman say, "Good night, I'm going to bed," you will know the amount of work that she completes in a day, usually quietly and under the radar. Women say, "Okay, good night," and then for the next 20 minutes as they walk through the house, they pick up clutter, shoot off an email, RSV to a birthday party, pack a lunch, clean the bathroom, all on the way to bed. The woman's day is always incredibly busy. Now, I'm not discounting men's days, but this is women in leadership, so I'm going to be focusing on that. So, what did we do to help support all of these working women? And not all of them are moms. A lot of the women without children are still taking care of aging parents, and some have both parents and children, so they're the sandwich generation. So Washington Trust Bank has an outstanding culture, one that I'm very proud of. We are run by the fourth generation of the Stanton family who bought us 100 years ago. We're 119 years old, but great story, 100 years ago in 1920, Pete Stanton, our current chairman and CEO, had a great grandmother, Cora, who told him, "You need to get out of the meatpacking business and go buy Washington Trust Company." And for 1920, that's pretty empowered. So we love that we have this history of empowered, successful women who make us who we are today. In fact, Pete will say, "I know I'm here because of a woman." So we have leveraged that, and we have women-oriented leadership training. We have a new one rolling out once we can get people back on site, and we'll name it Cora after Cora Stanton. So what did we do in the pandemic? We looked at the hurdles that were holding women back, and we asked them, what do they need from us? And I think that's a key thing a lot of companies forget to do. They think they may know what women need, but really you just need to ask. So we did a survey. We needed to delineate our population for COVID, who needs to come on site, who can go remote, who's high risk, who has high risk people at home, who has young kids at home that need care, because remember on Friday, March 13th, schools got canceled. So then we looked at all those hurdles and figured out how we could remove some of them. Parents obviously had some concern about people coming into their house to watch their kids, right? It's April. We don't know what COVID's doing. We're scrubbing groceries off. We're hearing scary things. So they weren't necessarily ready to have people come into their home that they didn't know, especially. So we created a child care connection page on our intranet. You could get lists of trusted babysitters, often their colleagues, high school or college-aged kids who now had a lot of free time on their hands because sports were canceled, and others could post their needs. We created a resource page. We offered mental health counseling. We mailed happy lights to the homes of those working remotely when we sent 720 people home overnight. And a big thing that I was really somewhat surprised by the feedback was a letter that I wrote as the head of HR to working parents, not just moms, but working parents. And I enclosed a $10 coffee card. And I just wrote a couple quick paragraphs basically saying, I see you. I know this is hard. I have 2 middle school children myself. I get it. We're here to support you. Call me and tell me what you need. Your employer is here for you. And I gave them the $10 coffee card because 7th grade algebra is really hard and we need caffeine. So that was not a very expensive endeavor per se, but it was so powerful. We have incentive plans that pay out thousands of dollars a year in production incentive. And yet that little thing that I did had more impact, I think, than some of those incentive plans. I had several handwritten thank you notes mailed to my house and tons of emails. And it reminded me that the biggest thing that you can do is just make sure people know they are seen. You don't have to have a big plan or a fancy budget. Be transparent and tell them you recognize this is hard. I get it. What can I do? It becomes very meaningful for employees to hear that. It's definitely part of our culture to have our employees take great care of our clients and for our leaders to take great care of our people. And I'm really proud of everything that we did through the pandemic to take care of all of our employees. We offered paid COVID leave. We wanted to make sure that nobody showed up sick because they had to choose between work and paying their bills if they were brand new and didn't have leave, for instance, versus staying home if they had a symptom and not getting themselves or others sick. I'm really proud of our COVID response because ultimately at the end of the day, we had a very small, based on the percentage of our workforce, small COVID employee numbers, given that we have almost 1,200 employees in 3 states. And it was key. We didn't want our people to put their health or the health of their household members, some of whom are high risk, at risk because they didn't have pay time available. So we covered all of that. We have always offered flex schedules, and we certainly did a lot of that in the pandemic, and we will continue to do that. We recognize that, it's nice to take your lunch at 2, pick up your elementary kids or your babies from school, take them home. The older the kids get, sadly, the less time they want to spend with you. So Brooke, enjoy that time with London. Eventually they get to the age where they say, hi, Mom. They chat with you for 2 minutes and then they run off. But nonetheless, you get to be the first person they see after school. You can go back to work, whether it's remotely or in your office. And that becomes a really meaningful perk for working parents. So we're going to continue to be able to do that. So how do we continue to support women as a society going forward and as businesses? My answer is we need to be really intentional. Make sure women are getting invited to the right meetings. Women do need sponsors and mentors, and there's a big difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A sponsor is the advocate that Brooke spoke of, and these can be men or women, but that's someone who says, hey, we should make sure Susie's at this meeting. And make sure we get new leaders or high potential women to get the seat at the table and get the attention they need. Another thing, give women feedback. Tell them how they can improve. Sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't want to hurt her feelings, so I'm not going to tell her what she did wrong in that meeting. That is not okay. We're big girls. We're not going to cry every time you give us constructive feedback. So deliver it. My big thing is don't talk about them, talk to them. Give them that feedback. At the same time, I would also say be receptive to feedback. When they ask you for things that they need or how you can help get them at the table or get them in the meetings or get them the visibility on those projects, be receptive to that. I'm talking to both men and women there. Finally, be aware of any unconscious biases you may have. For instance, sometimes in interviews, the male candidate is described as direct and the woman is described as a bulldog and too forceful, even though they may communicate in the same way. So be aware of that. Look past that as you're evaluating candidates for roles. In addition, don't expect the lone woman at the group and the table to take notes from the meeting. Assign that to someone else or rotate it around. And women, don't be the first to whip out your notepad. Unless you are the executive assistant, don't take on those duties that aren't higher level professional duties for which you were paid. Offer that up for someone else. Give them the opportunity to do that, or wait for them to get it assigned. Women definitely have a lot of skills they can leverage that make them very successful. Sometimes I call it the iron hand and the velvet glove, so to speak. I think typically women have more emotional intelligence than men do in some situations, and they have that savviness to navigate some tense situations without having it escalate into an all-out brawl. Lots of research, and some of that was quoted today, shows that companies with women in their executive ranks and at the board level are more financially successful. Women, my advice to you, go forth and be the rock star that you are. Rise above the fray, be professional at all times, no drama, and remember, you will see what you look for. It's not always this big evil boys club out there, but if you're looking for that, you will find it. Also, I would say build relationships. I'm big on networking and relationship building. Get a connection with a couple of key leaders within your company. Get to know them, build up some history with them. They can become a sponsor and an ally for you when it comes time for a promotion or when you make a big mistake and you may need cover, things like that. And at the end of the day, have some perspective. You're not going to be perfect in every scenario. You're not going to make perfect decisions. Neither is every man, by the way. So give yourself some grace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was excellent. Our next presenter is a prominent HR professional, speaker, and author. So when I was looking for a male perspective of the impacts the pandemic has had on women in the workplace, I knew Wade Larson could provide it. Dr. Wade Larson serves as Human Resources Officer at Wagstaff, Inc., a longtime Spokane Valley manufacturer. He has worked with hundreds of organizations and thousands of individuals as a consultant and HR executive to help them do more, achieve more, and be more. As an international speaker and author, Wade encourages leaders to improve leadership effectiveness. His latest book, Transform HR, helps businesses successfully navigate the largest challenges facing leaders today. Wade is traveling today, it turns out, and the internet where he is, not so good. So Wade sent me a video over the weekend with his tale from the front. And so if you'll oblige us, I think it's got some value there. So please welcome Wade Larson.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity for letting us share a few of the things that we're doing over at Wagstaff. So recognizing that, like others in manufacturing, we have a lot of guys that work in manufacturing, and it's sometimes tough to bring women over to get attracted to engineering and manufacturing. Sometimes it's because of the stigma that exists, and so we find ourselves sometimes challenged. And we also find it challenging even to recruit people to go into the trades or into engineering when we're talking to folks in junior high and high school. So, it also doesn't help that we have some challenges like the pandemic that come in for when we're talking about women who are currently in the workforce. So I take Angela, for example. Angela is on my team. And when I take a look at the challenges that she faces with something like daycare, that's been an incredible challenge over the last year and a half when things such as, well, is school on today or off today? How many daycares have closed over the past, year and a half? The older child, it's okay, they can come, but the younger child, we don't have room for them now. It's incredible. And so in some cases, as people have had to work from home, some of the spouses can swap with them. In other cases, the spouse can't. And so as employers start to talk about bringing their employees back to the workplace, the employees are just flat out challenged because they can't find daycare to accommodate. So in my case with Angela, she comes to work at the workplace 2 or 3 times a week. And her spouse can juggle that back and forth between her parents and her spouse. That works for her, and it works for us too. But in other cases, if an employer doesn't have a woman-friendly, a mom-friendly policy, that just doesn't work out. In my case, I also offer that though to all my employees. There's some fairness component there, but at the same time, as I look at this and I say, well, what's the real impact? Yes, sometimes I have kids in my Zoom meetings with my employees, and you know what? It doesn't really impact anything. I don't see any reduction in performance. In fact, in some cases, it's even better. I have the convenience there, I have the performance there, so what's the big deal? And as employers, we really need to ask that question, what's the big deal? If it's not impacting performance and it allows for the flexibility that our employees need to get the job done, that is what we need to consider if we're going to attract and retain the women in our positions in our company. And that's what we're going to have to look forward to. This whole return to normal, there is no normal. This perceived normal of going back to what it was 2 or 3 years ago, that's not going to happen. This perspective of, hey, things are going to go back to the way they were, it's not going to happen. So as employers, we need to start looking ahead progressively to say, how can we figure out what we're doing today and be better at it than to wait it out and think that things are going to get better. We need to be more proactive to figure out how we can accommodate and how we can do things better. Yes, we have to schedule around our employees and their kids and their spouses and the dogs, but that's going to be what we do. That's going to be that is the normal. So understand those are just some of the things that we have to work through. Now, with Barb Parks as our owner and president, right, with a woman as our head of Wagstaff, understand we're always looking for opportunities to grow the presence of women in leadership and throughout our company. And so a few years back, I recall, take Shelley, for example, she was one of our frontline managers, and we saw her as somebody with high potential. And she was a great performer, and she came to us to say, hey, I'm looking for something more. And we said, well, we're looking for you to do something more. And so looking ahead, we saw her as a potential to move into a director position out there with her director of production. And so we're looking at about a 5-year plan when that director was set to retire. And so we set up a personal development plan. We set up an education plan. Over the course of 5 years, we'd have her ready and able to be qualified for that position. Well, 5 years happened in about 18 months. And so she was nowhere close to being qualified for the position. Well, you know what? We didn't want anybody else in that job. We really didn't. We didn't have anybody else on the list. We wanted her. And so we put her in there. We took the risk, took the chance, and just said, let's just do it. And we did it. It was the best decision that we ever made. Now, sure, she didn't have her degree yet. She didn't have the qualifications. She didn't have it, but she had the attitude. And she had the spunk, she had the drive, the initiative, and we knew she was the right person. So we threw her in there. Now, like others, right, we put in the milestones and said, hey, when you hit these milestones, we'll move you up as we need to, right? We gave her a good raise, right? And we moved her up with the milestones like we do anybody else. But you know what? She jumped in with both feet. She started her degree right away. She started her aggressive training right away. And she was making it up as she went. So she went in with both feet, started making the changes, started making the shifts that she needed to on the job. And on the other side, she's jumping in with her professional development, and she's taking all the training and mentoring that she needs to as she goes. So understand, she shifted culture as fast as she could. She was drinking from the fire hose at full speed. Now, with this, understand, she went in with all of our support. And so everybody knew that what she said goes. And she was changing the culture. She was changing the structure. She was changing the system. But everybody knew that we had her back. And that is how culture shifts. So this whole thing changed. I mean, the whole change, it paid off, because not only does it shift the way that we're doing things, it changed the operations, it changed the way that we're doing things, but she had full authority to do whatever was needed. But if you really want to make a statement, if you want to be bold about changing your culture, you have to make a bold move. And as a leadership group, we said, let's make a bold move. And you know what? She wasn't ready, but whoever is, you never are ready. And as an organization, never be fully ready to do this. And that's what it takes if you're going to make a culture move. And we did it. Best move ever. And she's thriving. She's having fun. Everybody respects her, and it was the right move. And as a family-owned organization, you take the right person who's in the family and you move them to the right spot, and you do it. But this is how we do it, and this is how we grow. And so looking ahead of how we build the next generation, these are some of the same moves we build into our summer academy, our production and manufacturing academy. So as we look ahead there, we can bring in 20 kids into the summer academy as we try and expose them to principles of engineering and manufacturing. And we give them, over the course of this year, it's going to be 3 weeks, hands-on exposure to what the entire process is for manufacturing, production, the whole 9 yards. So last time we were able to do it the summer before the pandemic. It's the same as what we're going to do this year. We bring in 20 kids. Now, with 20 kids, you can only do so much within a period of time. And within the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's a pretty wide spectrum. So we decided, we're going to focus in on gender. We want to be as inclusive as we can. So we're going to see how many women that we can expand this to. So our goal is to hit 50-50, half and half, boys and girls. And that's what our primary focus is. It's a big focus. So we can expose as many women, as many future women as we can into leadership and into coming into the industry. And so our goal is to get half and half boys and girls into this program, give them the hands-on experience into engineering, manufacturing, leadership. And you know what? If they don't come into this industry, so be it. But if they have a great experience and they can talk to others about it, that's cool. That's what we're looking for. So that's what we're after. And this year is no different. So looking at the roster, we're pretty close. I think we're at 9. We took basically all the girls who applied, we brought in there, and we're going to have a great time. But this is what it takes with our current group, with the future group. That's what it takes to promote and build and sustain women in leadership, and to really grow this and to build that culture that's going to be successful. But we can't do it alone. It's not just about what Wagstaff does. It's about what all of us do in the industry and in the workplace. But it's going to take proactive. It's not just organic. It's got to take proactive steps to make a difference. And that's what we're after. That's what we're trying to promote. And so again, thank you very much for letting us share a few of the things that we're doing within Wagstaff. Thanks for, I know I'm the guy on the panel, but as the representative from HR, I want to just share some of the things that we're doing inside as a family-owned business. Barn Parks couldn't be here today, but just wanted to share with you some of the things that we're doing within Wagstaff to help promote that. So anyway, thanks again. If anyone wants to reach out and talk to me about what we're doing, I'd be happy to help and share with you what we're doing. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Wade. Appreciate you taking the time out for vacation. Looks like you're getting some sun there, so good for you. Our final tale from the front today comes from someone who not only runs an important organization, but also has become known as a leader in our community. She is Toni Lodge, CEO of the Native Project. Toni leads a center that offers integrated medical and behavioral health services, dental clinic, and pharmacy, serving people from more than 300 Native American tribes. But there's much more to her than that. She was described in a Spokesman Review article after being named a Woman of the Year as a champion for the disenfranchised and voiceless, although she will tell you, no one is voiceless. She is a member of the Turtle Mountain Chippewa tribe and grew up in North Dakota and Montana. She served as a reporter for Knight Ridder and also the United Tribes Technical College in North Dakota before moving to Spokane in 1979. Here she has worked for a regional tribe, the YWCA, and Spokane Public Schools before helping to create the Native Project in 1989. A CEO for 30 years, Toni is known as a storyteller, a mentor, and a leader. But she will tell you her most important jobs are that of mother and grandmother. I'm honored to welcome Toni Lodge.
Thank you. I am also properly intimidated. I see how many people are on the Zoom here, but I am a storyteller, and the story that I want to tell is really from the front line, what happened in the healthcare industry during COVID, and really how it affected our employees. As Paul said, I'm one of the founders of the Native Project, Urban Indian Health, FQHC Community Health Clinic here in Spokane. We started with $100, and now we have a $16 million budget. I do practice matriarchy as our business model. And that means that the majority of our C-suite and mid-levels are females at this time, but it also is a model using mentoring and coaching, as the women before me said, and really using circle management, which is a well-known practice in the Native community. I just want to talk about how COVID has affected us. You may or may not know, but the very first COVID case in Spokane County was at the Native Project. It was a Native woman with 3 little kids in an apartment, and we were petrified. We were terrified. She was terrified. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew what to do. And that was on March 11th of last year. So we scrambled. I have never seen any operation pivot. I hate that word pivot, but turn on a dime. We put in air scrubbers, we put air purifiers, we put in touchless doors. We figured out how to do testing. We sent our elders home. That is in part of our practice of matriarchy. We protected our elders, including myself, who worked remote. We sent some people up to furlough, but most people had to work. It's a community health clinic. People were pounding on the doors, begging to be tested, literally, because we had one of the first Abbott testing machines in Spokane. So we figured it out. We did the speed of light. We suited up and showed up. And the byword at Native Project, our business model, our service delivery model is called sacred hospitality, which is what we tried to do with our patients in our community. But the root word in sacrifice is sacred. And so it was a dual task to offer that sacred hospitality, but also there was an element of sacrifice that I have not experienced in my life. And I'm, like Paul said, I'm a 65-year-old grandmother, and I have never seen people put their heart into their work like I've seen the past year. And that's the employees. Our medical staff, our doctors and mid-levels, have a caseload. Our mental health professionals, our substance use professionals have a caseload. I always say my caseload is my employees. I am, as I practice matriarchy, I am their coach. They call me the work mom, which is like, you guys, we need to get a better boundary than that. But it really is, to be there to support our employees. But I'm sent home, right? I have an underlying condition. I'm a cancer survivor. Our medical director would not let me be here, and it was really hard. It's like, the sergeant has to go home, and how do we corral our troops? Well, we in that rapid response, we probably bought because we had the first case. Remember, we knew what was coming. We had not done telehealth. We scoured this community and probably bought up every laptop and computer. And I apologize for that. But we implemented telehealth. And within a week, 50 to 80% of our visits were virtual. And, it was like boomer time. Learn the Zoom, Tony. Learn every little thing that you need to learn. And the other people my age had to do that. Our productivity did not dip very much. Our financial losses last year were not very much because of the quick response by our employees to telehealth. Anyway, our youngest staff, our youngest doctors, our youngest nurses, our care coordinators volunteered to do the testing of patients, and we did it outside. Again, we did not really know how much risk we were at. We did not get PPE. We did not get N95s. And those of you who know me know how angry I am about this. We did not get N95 masks for our staff until May. And what we got was 10-year-old expired N95s. So again, people talking about how disproportionately COVID has affected women and like our little patient, but it's also really affected communities of color. So my staff went outside and tested hundreds and hundreds of people in this community with 10-year-old expired N95s. And it took a mental toll on people. People were frightened. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And again, got that morning Zoom, words of assurance, talked about the science, had the providers and the pharmacists take turns, really explaining what we knew about COVID. But what happened was, well, first of all, our clinic director made a very interesting observation to me, Dylan. She said it was so weird to one day walk in the clinic and all the elders were gone. It must have been how it is in pandemics. The people that you count on to lead and for support were gone. We were out of the building. We were only on the Zoom. And she said it really hit her as a millennial. We really got to do this. We're really in charge now. We're responsible for the life our community. Anyway, after you know, learning the science, learning the techniques, making do with second-class protective gear, second-class testing until I get really May. So for two months, we had to operate like that. People started resisting, and I know this was in the workplace. So again, me, cancer survivor, other elders with chronic health conditions, our employees, and we have a very multi-generational workforce. Our youngest employee is 16, our oldest is 72, and she got sent home too. You know, that group of people between 20 to 30, you know, they really thought COVID was not about them. So those are the people that went to the casino, went to the bars, went to the restaurants, the few that were open, went to social gatherings. And there's huge resentment building up in our medical clinic, because we're like, we're trying to save lives here, people. Why are you not doing what you need to do? But again, as I talked to other employers, it was, and other clinic directors, it was, I heard the same story about the challenges between the interpersonal relationships, the intergenerational relationships. Here's us, you know, we're not touching, we're not traveling, we're doing universal precautions. And these young people are out there. So we had no clinic COVID spread. No employee got COVID in the clinic. Employees in that age group did get COVID. And we too had a COVID PTO specifically that we were able to pay for. But I think the other thing that's happened, and I am on the Governor Inslee's Safe Start Reopen Washington COVID Advisory Committee or board. It's been one of 3 people from Eastern Washington on it. So I've had the privilege of hearing a lot of science, a lot of social determinants of health, a lot of, especially from the BIPOC community. One of the things that I heard that was very pertinent to me is that we are incubating PTSD right now. We are incubating, we're going to have a bow wave in the next 10 years of the long-term effects of this experience, both physically for some people, but mostly mentally, emotionally, and probably spiritually. So we really took a look at that and we're like, okay, every day we talk about the science of COVID, protect yourself, treat the patients, intervene. But we're like, I think the lady from Washington Trust Bank, our bank, by the way, you know, we had to figure out employee wellness that was at a different level. We have a very robust employee assistance program, but that was not what we were talking about. So we did really, and a lot of it was, you know, gym reimbursements, you know, all the gyms are closed, all the people that's how they dealt with their stress, you know, couldn't go there. So we really tried to craft something different because we've been dealing with sick patients. You know, the first patient that we had that passed away was April 2nd, you know, 2 or 3 weeks into the Spokane pandemic. We had no funerals. We have a cultural custom of grieving our losses. Every single person in this building has lost patients, has lost community members, has lost family, has lost friends. And we were not able to relieve our stress about it. And to see every day, a churn every day, you know, you're seeing 50, 60 patients, and, you know, 40 of them are here for testing for COVID. It was an unbelievable stressor, but we did do different things. You know, we started paying for like Weight Watchers, not just gyms, and paying for Peloton programs and, you know, the co-pays of your insurance for counseling, even though, you know, we paid the insurance. You know, we paid for somebody's pickleball paddles. I mean, these guys they were compulsive pickleball players over here at AM Canna Park. We paid for meditation classes. We paid for mediation because people got really stressed with each other. A lot of conflict that was not there before. And the other thing that I like to say is that the mom things was true. So imagine if you're a nurse, you have an autistic child, and you have to run home and hook that child up to their Zoom. We became just really, not really happens. We got really flexible with our employees, tried to manage, you know, that you're always here for patients. but also tried to be flexible. In September, we bought our first Sub-Zero freezer. We didn't know that would be our saving grace, that a freezer, a box, 3x3 would save so many lives. Because we had the freezer, we were one of only 2 clinics in the state that had that Sub-Zero freezer for the Pfizer vaccine. We got the first in the Indian health world. We got our Pfizer vaccine on December 17th. We're the first clinic in Spokane. Lined up the frontline providers, lined up our elders, lined up our patients. I was not as deeply aware of how much stress the staff had been through. I saw people that I've known for 30 years break down and cry. They were so relieved to get the vaccine. And I thought, these people for a year, have been facing COVID like this. And it was like the mood lifted as everybody got the vaccine. And my clinic is 100% vaccinated. Because of what we've seen, I think, and the education we got, we have become 100% vaccinated. Our staff in their relief wanted to share that with our community. And because of my experience on the governor's committee for Reopen Washington, we saw the numbers that people of color, BIPOC communities were so under vaccinated, and specifically in Eastern Washington and Central Washington. So we worked with the governor's office, we worked with another health jurisdiction, and we put on communities of color COVAX clinics. And we did it with African-American community, NAACP, Martin Luther King Center. We did it with the Latinx community, with Latinos in Spokane, and Planned Parenthood. Did it with the Asian Pacific Islander communities, did it with the urban community, Indian community, local tribes. And our last clinic that we did just 2 weeks ago was for 12 to 17-year-olds. So my staff feels so relieved, and they keep saying, I'm so relieved that my own life got saved, and that they wanted to pass that on. And we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of vaccines for not just people of color, but we really targeted that community because we are so we're underrepresented. And then the last thing I would say is, I now, because of the relief and because of the work we've done in the community, everything we read was that there would be this post-COVID change in our staff, and I'm seeing it. People are deciding they don't want to do this work anymore, that they almost died from doing this work, or they don't get paid enough to be this stressed out, that they want more time with their families. Not the elementary school parents. They're not the ones that want more time with their families, but I want more time with my 82-year-old mother. It really changed people and reevaluated themselves. I do expect a lot of people have talked to me again. My caseload said, I really want to do something different now. I lived through the pandemic of a lifetime. I think I meant to be doing something else. So we just got to get ready for change. So the only thing that stays the same is change. And I appreciate you asking me to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. And we're running a little bit late today, but no, you're fine. But this is really good content. So I hope y'all hang tough with us for a few minutes. Although we try to mix up each year the speakers that we bring for this event, there is one constant, and that is I tend to bring in the unvarnished approach of Marty Dickinson to the discussion. So backed by popular demand, Marty will lead us through the fascinating results we received from you and other past attendees of the Women in Leadership event of the past 3 years. I could probably talk about Marty's bio for an hour, but I'll tell you that she is the Chief Marketing Officer at STCU. Before joining STCU, she served as an Executive Vice President at Umpqua Bank and before that in executive capacities at Sterling Savings Bank, which of course merged with Umpqua. She was also known very well here as the president of the Downtown Spokane Partnership at one time. A graduate of Washington State University, Marty serves on WSU's Board of Regents, as well as the Public Facilities District, Regents Blue Shield Foundation in Washington, and the Association of Washington Business. I'm so pleased Marty agreed to join us again this year. So please welcome my friend, Marty Dickinson.
Thank you, Paul. And thanks, everybody. We'll move quickly through here. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I know that we've run long. So I think you'll be able to see up on the screen the first question. And I want to thank the panelists who have spoke here today. They all have offered such a diverse and enriching amount of information. I will say a couple of interesting things. Katie Bruije and I sat at the Davenport when she was coming back from maternity leave, having a glass of wine, just trying to kind of figure out how she was returning, as I had just recently returned from having my third child. And it was a time in which we just were trying to kind of support each other. And I think that that's a message that has been really woven through this whole story today. I will say, as many of you on this call have probably followed me for many years, I have 3 children. They're all grown now. So I've gone through the interesting process of what many of you have spoke about and worked through currently. And then your role becomes, in the middle of a pandemic, you have a 22-year-old daughter who's graduating from college, but doesn't get to really graduate, loses the job opportunity she was supposed to have. So you step into a role of more of, coach. And how do you put one foot in front of the other? And how do you empower your children, your 22-year-old daughter, your 20-year-old son graduating from college at the same time, your 18-year-old daughter going off to Arizona State or University of Arizona in a time when she was locked in a box and she was, starting her engineering degree. All of these things that just, they don't really change. They just tend to get harder and heavier, if you will. And you have to rely on support of other women in particular who can give you some bit of a roadmap on how you navigate some of these interesting turns, twists and turns, how to coach your kids, how to empower your young daughters, how to teach your son how to empower other women. And quite frankly, just, how to lift everybody up all the time. So it's an interesting time for sure, regardless if you have a newborn like Brooke, kids right in the thick of it, like Katie, Lindsay, who's, she and I spent many, many hours together in the last 14 months as we both have gone into the office every day. And I've tried to demonstrate grace to Lindsay and empathy as I know where she is at and all that she is juggling. And she in turn tries to demonstrate support and awareness of where I am at as, we do our jobs, but yet have these other very real things occurring outside of that workplace. So what has your workplace done to support women and families during the pandemic? Well, some people have said they've demonstrated grace, they've shown flexibility, they've engaged with families. Unfortunately, we see that some people said that they did basically what the state required, no concerted effort. There was childcare opportunities for people. Remote working obviously was a pretty significant one for people, allowing you to care for your children, right? And allowing you to care for your parents and for your pets. I mean, kids were clearly a factor in this, but a lot of people had some other heavy things to carry through this time. And so we've seen a lot of people talking about increased mental health and physical services to be available. So next slide in the next question is, what other organizations are you aware of that found creative ways to support women and families in this time? Well, our tried and true, proud to see STCU right smack in the middle of all that, but Avista, ALSC, Greater Spokane Incorporated, Washington Trust Bank, as you've heard today, the Inlander, Itron, Amazon, Women Helping Women Fund, Northern Quest Casino, Community Minded Enterprises, Whitworth, These are all different companies, you guys, that came up, and it's no surprise that these companies were mentioned multiple times. And I think you've heard of that today. You look at companies like Greater Spokane Incorporated as a nonprofit where Alicia Benson is leading that organization. Or you look at Numerica, where you have a female executive like Carla as the CEO. You have Washington Trust with people like Katie in executive leadership. You start to see a pattern. You look at ALSC Architects and a CEO like Rustin Hall, who has great value and understands the depth and breadth that women bring to his industry every day. So we would like to just continue to see more and more names and new names like Spiceology pop up here. WashDOT, I think, is really great. This Itron, St. George's School. Let's start to really hope that we can continue to see more and more companies showing up on lists like this. Next question. As we emerge from the pandemic, what can organizations do to better support women and develop them for leadership roles? I think we've heard so much about that today, but people are talking about mentoring, cross-training, opportunity for promotion, remove barriers, curb gender biases, develop confidence. I'm going to say something that I think is probably, I don't know how everybody will grab this, but I think we have an interesting opportunity as women right now to perhaps leverage this pandemic and the things that have worked that, in some cases, employers were forced to do some options that they would have never done had it not been for the pandemic. How do we as women start to evolve the narrative that we have here, which is we talk a lot about the things we need. We talk a lot about the things of what have you done for us and where are the gaps? And I think that it perhaps is an opportunity that we start to change the narrative around, here's the things we did for you during a crisis and a pandemic. Here's the things we accomplished while being at home or working with different flexible hours, that we change the narrative a little bit around to the fact that here's what we're doing for you. And here is where we want you to meet us. Instead of perhaps consistently taking the approach of what did they do for us, at times that is, they know what the gaps are, right? But we have a responsibility to truly help change the narrative a bit. Maybe it's time to evolve it a bit around telling and sharing our story around the contributions we make, how we can continue to make those, and the solutions that we expect as a female population to come and engage with the workforce. So next question, in your mind, what's the greatest challenge organizations face in getting more women into leadership? Well, lots of people said old leadership cultures, hiring teams that lack women, perceptions, dedication to work, men are blind to the problem, societal norms, balance, the status quo, getting women to believe in themselves, fear of change by leaders, sacrificing family time, limited career opportunities. And again, I would say I go back to, in my mind, one of the greatest challenges is that I think it's time that women start to take control of the narrative. We've identified what the gaps are. We know what the problems are. We've heard much of what is happening to start to change that ship a little bit. And I think the pandemic, in some ways, helped some of that. Now, how do we grab onto it? And how do we truly leverage what did work and create expectations for going forward and taking control of that? So the other continued, greatest challenge, I think, is when you see things around women to believe in themselves, building courage, finding ways to have mentor or coaching. That's really upon us to help one another. And, as Katie said in her her Starbucks cards that she sent to everybody, and she made a very simple statement of, I see you. I would simply say to all the women that I work with and that I aspire to be and that I am humbly honored to kind of sit on a panel like this with, I see you. And we need to see one another, and we need to help each other build our confidence. We need to support one another in building our confidence. And we truly have an opportunity to change the narrative here around what we offer, what we bring, and how we want to be met. And I think we are sitting on the cusp of that. And I think there's amazing women and men on this call today to be able to truly help start to evolve that narrative. And perhaps next year, Paul, one of the questions is, what are all the things we have done as women to lift up this community and our business community from every industry? What is it we're doing? Not what they are doing for us, but what are we doing for them? I think is the next story I'd like to be a part of writing and sharing, because it's really quite phenomenal when you start to look and hear from people like we did today. And when I look to see who the participants on this call are, it is really quite remarkable how blessed we are in this community to have such an amazing force of fierce, really badass, smart women. So thanks for having me, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity for SDCU to sponsor this. And I look forward to getting to be in person very, very soon.
Thank you, Marty. Excellent as always, flawless and inspirational. I know we're late. I know I'm not the only one who's ready for lunch. But before we conclude today, I want to tell you about a publication the Journal's news team has prepared in conjunction with this event. You'll receive it in tomorrow's regular issue of the Journal, and we'll provide it with a link to a digital version of it via email to registered attendees today, along with a link to a recorded video of this event. We have stories about entrepreneurship, networking, and some contributed pieces from some thought leaders in our community. I think you'll like what you read. On behalf of the Journal, I want to once again thank our sponsors, STCU, Avista Corporation, and Innovia Foundation. We appreciate your support. Thanks also to our presenters today, Vanj Hockheimer, Brooke Baker Spink, Katie Bruije, Wade Larson, Tony Lodge, Marty Dickinson, and Lindsay. I know you weren't technically a presenter, but thanks for everything you said as well. I'd also like to thank the committee of women and men who helped to guide the Journal and content for this event. You'll see their names on the screen. Thank you so much to each of you. All right, it's lunchtime. We're hungry. Have a great day. We are adjourned.